Before he ever built a business, Miles was just a kid watching YouTube videos, and somehow that changed the trajectory of his entire life. From Tony Robbins to Gary Vee to Rob Drydeck, today he's sharing the full story of how 15 years of content shaped his mindset, direction, and his success.
To the rhythm of my intuition, anything I want, I speak into existence. That's how I'm.
Welcome to episode 22 of Finding Rhythm. Thank you. Comment on the video, like the video, subscribe to the video. Okay, let's go.
Miles, you've been consuming content for 15 plus years. What made you want to talk about this now?
It's something that I have thought about quite a bit. I think even my kind of framework of like consuming and creating and being like what you consume makes a big impact on you as an individual. And then just thinking about my life of why do I think the way that I think, and just self-reflecting of like what has my kind of content diet been to kind of build me up this way. So I think it's just a self-reflection of that, and I thought it'd be fun to go back and explore it.
Do you remember your first real memory of content having an impact on you?
Yeah. Even with that, I know the real changer of it. It's just like content having an impact. You know, as like a kid, it would be like sport movies, like Remember the Titans or Field of Dreams or Miracle or Rocky, kind of those pieces. Those would I would say those are the real first memories of the content having an impact. I always love those stories, underdog stories, sports stories. So I was always drawn to those movies. But having a real impact on me was probably like just after high school. That was probably when it really came in.
Let's go back a little bit. What was happening in your life when you first came across Tony Robbins clips and motivational compilations?
Yeah, I would say this is the real time that the content has had a big impact on me, which if I think back, it was like just after high school, I was like lost of like what direction I was going into. Lost down in the dumps, all your friends are off to university and they know exactly where they're going and what they're doing. And you're just kind of still at home and it's like, I don't know what's up next. And I came across YouTube videos, and it was like Tony Robbins motivational like seminars or keynotes or just like his audio tracks. And that was like I started to pull on that thread, and I had never heard anyone like talk like that or say the things that he was saying of this like self-improvement mindset or philosophy on life. You are responsible. You can be responsible for change in your own life. It was this very unique thing that, at that time, it's like I hadn't heard anyone talk like that before, right? No one in my family talked like that. Teachers didn't talk like that. Coaches didn't talk like that. And once I pulled on that thread, I went to like Les Brown or Jim Rohn, and I would just listen to these like hour-long compilations of these people doing like motivational talking. And I would listen to them like every day. If I was just like cleaning my room, I'd listen to it. If I was cutting the grass, I'd listen to it. If I was going for a walk, I'd listen to it. And it was like I was beginning to brainwash belief in myself at this time. And while I was consuming this, Lace Belt was like starting to do things, right? And, idea was becoming a reality at the same time while I was like listening to this stuff of like, you could literally create your own future. So these things were converging at the same time, which really just then pumped the belief even more of like, oh, this shit's real. Like, So there was a huge mindset shift and unlock of just what was possible. So that was a huge, huge impact.
And then came the podcast era. What shows hit for you during that time?
Yeah. So now I'm like in YouTube world, and podcasting was starting to emerge. And I think the next big one was Tim Ferriss podcast. He was kind of like the OG of these long form conversations with high performers or these unique individuals. So I was just listening to these in-depth conversations with all these incredible people that, whether it was a business person or an entrepreneur or an athlete or a movie star or whatever it was, I got to like hear how they thought and how they think about life and kind of what their lens was on the life that they lived, while they were also storytelling about their journey too. And it was so relatable and inspiring at the same time. And once again, this was just like another building block of like, oh, like there's so many different ways to do it that people have already done. And all these different views on life, and just listening in on how I would bucket them as high performance individuals live their life, and these tactics and these frameworks and these stories. And it was like eye-opening of like, oh wow, like there's unique individuals out there, and this is cool. Then if I think back, another element, and I like, so you're listening to hours and hours of these people talk. Again, like this is all the podcast era where it's the explosion of it is you can do two things at once, right? You can, whatever it is that you're doing the dishes, you can listen to this thing. You're cleaning a room, you can be listening to this. You're going for a walk, you're driving in the car. You could be doing two things at once, so you can consume a lot of it, right? You can consume hours and hours and hours and hours, which I did. And then there was How I Built This with Guy Raz, which was this like beautiful storytelling podcast. So it was like entertainment as well too, the way that he crafted it and put it together, plus the individual story of how they built something. And it was all these business owners. And this was a huge one too, because it was all these incredible entrepreneurs telling detailed stories of how they built whatever it is that they had built. And if you want to like build belief of what's possible, and you just hear over and over and over of all these individuals coming from different places in their life and all their different stories and all these different obstacles that they overcame to then create something beautiful or something big, that into my kind of content idea was perfect, as Summer Skates was like early stages of Summer Skates was starting to go on. So those two were huge, like a huge unlock in what I was consuming from a content standpoint.
You mentioned you were building Summer Skates at the time. And how did Gary Vee's content influence what you were doing day to day?
Yeah, Gary Vee came into my life at like the most perfect time. This is like the era of, now it was, I was coming off of just not just listening, but watching too, where it was almost like a television show for me, where Gary Vee, he was doing like the Ask Gary Vee show where people would come in and ask questions. But the big one was when he did Daily V, which was a daily vlog style, him documenting him building his business at that time, which was VaynerMedia, which was like a modern ad agency. Number one, it was like this inspiring entertainment that I could watch, but as well too, he was like documenting all the tactics that he was doing, which was at the core of social media, right? Early Facebook days, Instagrams came out, Snapchat came out. So I could watch as entertainment too, but I could also pick up what he was doing for his clients or his businesses. And then I was applying them to while I was building summer skates. And it was like all these like ideas of like, okay, Facebook ads, that was like this huge thing. Then Instagram came out and we built up this big community on Instagram because I was just like following and listening to what he was saying. Snapchat came out. There was so much like arbitrage on Snapchat ads where I was running like, did you ever use Snapchat? No?
Yeah.
You did? And there's Snapchat filters and you could geotag certain areas and you could build your own Snapchat filter and put it up on this. And I was so early on it that I was doing NHL arenas. I geotagged NHL arenas and I built up a summer skate frame that if you were in the arena and you pulled out Snapchat, you could come across and you would see this summer skate thing. And so I built out like a Toronto Maple Leaf summer skate and I did it around the Air Canada Centre, or I did like a Sidney Crosby summer skates and I did Pittsburgh too. But I was so early on like that arbitrage that you had the ability to do it. Then people recognize like, okay, this is crazy because you're getting 20,000 people, 20,000 fans of this product in this area, and then they would block those off. Like, so that's how early, like just following what Gary was doing and then applying it to. So it was like this entertainment and learning while I was applying it and building the business. So that was this great piece too. Plus he had lots of great, like, kind of mindset, different things on perspective and, patience and all these things. Plus, it was so cool to see this like documentary style of someone building a business at the same time. So he came in at the perfect time while Summer Skates was starting to rip.
And then came that next wave of content, more philosophy and more long form. What did you take from people like Joe Rogan and Rob Dyrdek?
Rob Dyrdek.
I hope I'm pronouncing, Dyrdek.
Gotcha. It's okay.
So sorry,
it's a tough
Rob.
name.
Sorry, Rob.
It's all right. So yeah, at this time, so now I'm like really finding my rhythm from a business standpoint, taking that from Gary and, applying it to Summer Skates. And now, if I think back at that, because if you think about yourself like as a learner, right? But when the primary way to like learn about stuff was reading, but I hated reading. Like I never read like a book, really, because I'd be reading the book, but then my mind would go somewhere else. But now I got this new medium where I could listen and I could consume it way, way easier. Like it's just so much easier for me to listen to something and then actually download it. So then I was obsessed with learning about things. And Joe Rogan, like now Joe Rogan probably has like a brand of like, ooh, Joe Rogan, he's whatever your thought is on him. But he was bringing on all these guests of like the widest range of like interesting people and topics and having these long form conversations. So at the same time in that early stage where it was just like business people me listening to, now it was like kind of opening up this new domain of like all different aspects of life and listening in on these conversations and taking as well a disclaimer, like whatever you're listening to, that doesn't mean that you should take everything and be like as truth. You're allowed to listen to it and then form your own opinion. So that was like a wonderful era. And even to this day too, if he has an interesting guest, I'll plug in. But as you grow and evolve, your content diet changes. The big one was Rob Dyrdek, which Rob Dyrdek, who I had followed, he was a professional skateboarder and he did like these MTV shows like Robin Big and then Fantasy Factory, which I loved, even though I wasn't a skateboarder. But then he came out into like the podcast circuit and he did like Lewis Howe's School of Greatness podcast and this guy named Tom called Impact Theory and Jay Shetty over like a period of 3 years with kind of his core life philosophy that he had developed out of thinking of life in a more holistic approach of, health, life, working all together, figuring out what it is that you want out of life and reverse engineering it. And everything that he was saying in these things like was really, really connecting with me. And it was at the perfect time where I was starting to think of like, what is it that I'm trying to do in my life? Like, who do I want to become? Who do I want to do it with? You know, what do I want to do? What do I want my life to actually look like? So it was at this perfect time, like across 2016, 17, 18, 19, that he had start to put these out. And that really had a big impact on me as well, too. Where then I was starting to think of like, what's my life philosophy? Like, what is that I want to do? So he was a huge inspiration on that piece.
Now that you're creating content on your own, how do you think all of those years of consuming shaped what you're doing with Finding Rhythm?
Yeah, definitely has a huge impact. Number one, what you consume is going to have influence on who you are and how you think. And I don't necessarily, I don't have like the boldness of thinking that what I put out there will have the same impact as what those had on me. But maybe, I guess there could be a slight version of that. But I love that there's like just this documentation, like especially Rob's one, where it's like he has like that era in his life documented, even just from going on the podcast kind of circuit of like where he was in 2016, documented, 2017 documented. And then if you were to see his stuff now, you can see the evolution of it, of what his plan was and how it's changed and even how he thinks. So I like that aspect of kind of from a Finding Rhythm, where it's the things that I think about or believe right now, you know, in 3 years from now, what does that look like? Even though I'll probably never go back and watch these.
You mentioned that you've dialed it down quite a bit at the beginning of, April, March. What does content consumption look like for you today?
Yeah, I would say that at that chunk, I was in like pure, like, give me all the info. I want to learn. I want to hear all these opinions. I want to soak it all in. And you can kind of just, that could be a trap too, right? Like where you can just be listening to stuff all the time and not really doing stuff. So I've been really conscious of dialing that down now, where I just want to be in build mode, right? It's like, okay, I got enough contents to go apply it and, build out my own life philosophy and kind of live it and iterate that too. I don't need to be constantly be fed. So it's been super dialed down that way. Now I'm always gonna have some content mix coming in, which is pretty, I have like my first million is this show with these two entrepreneurs. That's kind of like an entertainment. I would say it's more entertainment than anything, where they just talk about businesses, business owners, trends, maybe some tactics and stuff. But it's just like fun to kind of consume. And then I have, call it the All In podcast, which is these 4 super successful, like kind of like billionaire people. And they're like global macro stuff, like big picture stuff. A lot of it's like above my pay grade, but I like just being slightly tuned in to, what they think about what's going on in the US right now, or what's going on with kind of global trade and, these kind of really, really big things. And there's a lot of conflicting ideologies on the show too, of the 4 of them. So there's a lot of debate that goes back and forth on these big topics, which I really like, because there's one thing that I never want to fall trap in, which is you get into your own kind of content ecosystem where they're just going to continuously be feeding you what it is that you want to hear, because from their standpoint, they have essentially build up like audience capture, where I want to keep their attention. So I'm going to keep talking about things that they agree with. And then you start to lose your perspective on other ways to look at situations. And then you're in conversations with people that are also consuming those same things. So that's just going to reinforce all the same beliefs. And you can really start to build like call it like a concrete like view on the world, right? And it's really too stuck and rigid, where when you're thinking about like a content diet, you want to be able to see it from different angles on these topics. So you can have an open viewpoint on everything, and then you can come to your conclusions on what your belief is or where do you stand on certain things. That's why I like that show too, because it takes these really big, heavy topics, and then there's these really smart people, but they're talking from different viewpoints in long form too, which is good. And then I will watch like kind of these documentary daily vlog style type things for a couple companies like BPN, Nick Bear, and Minted New York, and George from Represent. And that's just like purely entertainment. I just love watching, entrepreneurs build stuff. That's really it now. Maybe if like a cool guest like pops up, I'll watch that. But that's kind of what the content diet is now these days. So yeah, I'm in more creation mode.
What's one piece of content that changed the way you think? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how it's changed your journey.